Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moni wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids' teachers, the librarian, their principal. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Today we're very excited to welcome back one of our favorite guest hosts, Jordan Sahley. Hey, Jordan.
Hello, welcome to the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I'm your host for today, Jordan Sahley, and today we are joined by Linda Sue Park and Ellen O, who both worked on the new book, You Are Here. How are you guys doing?
Great. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, of course. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about the book?
Oh, yes, I'd love to. It's here. You Are Here. I think this is a gorgeous cover. I just want to point out that the cover art goes all the way to the back. Kudos to our artist, Marcos Chin. And You Are Here is basically 12 interconnecting stories about East Asian and Southeast Asian kids who are stuck in an airport, and something happens and it ripples through all of the other stories. And I kind of will leave it there.
Yeah, okay. I like the mystery. So how did you put this together? Was it an idea and then you were like, oh, let's get 12 different authors, or how did it come about?
So it came about because I am a founding member of an organization called We Need Diverse Books. And we did an anthology called Flying Lessons. And in that anthology, we had a story about a girl pirate by Grace Lin, but it was set in China. And a reader complained to us that the only East Asian story in the book was othering to East Asian Americans. And Grace and I were like, oh my gosh, kind of like, wow, we didn't even see this, right? And we wanted to kind of fix that because we had othered our own East Asian American story. And so we wanted a story we wanted a project like You Are Here that would tell those East Asian American stories. But that was in 2017. And since then, the pandemic happened, anti-Asian, hate came about, and it became all the more urgent to have a book talking about the Asian American experience, especially the East Asian American experience. And that's what ended up happening. And I contacted Linda Sue first. Linda Sue, remember that?
I sure do. This book is the launch title or the inaugural title for a new imprint called Alida Books. An imprint is like a little teeny tiny publishing house inside a bigger publishing house. So in this case, the bigger publishing house is HarperCollins, which many of your listeners will be familiar with. And what HarperCollins has done is to create this little tiny imprint called Alida Books, which I will be the curator for. I'm the founder and curator for Alida Books, along with editor Ann Hoppy. And so we will be choosing and publishing books that align with the mission to promote marginalized creators in the space of children's books. So when Ellen, I was having this idea for Alida and how it might be put together as an imprint and what I kind of wanted to do with it. And, I had 8 zillion ideas, which means that I had no idea, right? And so Ellen sent me this email inviting me to contribute a story to the anthology that she wanted to put together. And it's like everything gelled. It was like this huge light bulb moment. I'm like, this is the essence of what I want Alida Books to be about. It's 12 stories by Asian creators, Asian American creators, which is going to provide all readers with basically what amounts to nuance, that we are not a monolith. There's even, I think, 3 or 4 Korean American writers, and they're all different. All the characters in their stories are different. So, I mean, that's what happens with life experience portrayals of people and characters in popular culture, that you get the variety and the depth and the detail and the nuance. And then it becomes much harder to lump people into a dehumanizing group. So that's, a very long way of saying that I all of a sudden knew what kind of stories I wanted Alida to publish. And it just couldn't have been a better fit to have You Are Here, Ellen's effort, be Alida's inaugural title.
Yeah, of course. How long did it take you to put together Alida and also You Are Here? How long did each of those projects take to get up and going?
So I didn't even know what was, Linda Sue was keeping it very under tight wraps. So I had no idea what she was doing when I approached her. But I think I approached her in 2020. Is that right? Yeah. So I put the proposal together starting 2020. And so it's now March 2023. So it kind of gives you an idea of, what was it? Yes. I think it was November in 2020 that I reached out.
Yeah.
So that's how long it took. And Linda Sue, how long did Alida?
Alida was in the works for a very long time. It was probably early 2019 that Ann Hobby first approached me saying that she would like to put together an imprint with me. And there were many circumstances that slowed things down, the pandemic being one of them, of course. And in the middle of that, a merger, because the original imprint had been with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, which then was bought by HarperCollins. So that also slowed things down. Whenever, they have to merge 2 companies together, it becomes difficult. So it was a project a long time in the making, but I think in the end that ended up being a good thing because it gave me plenty of time to figure out and think about what I wanted this imprint to be. So these things, take time, but hopefully they'll be worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's worth it for us because we became the inaugural title. So
very worth it. Linda, I was reading an article that you were featured in that talked about how as a child you couldn't understand why all heroes were white growing up. Do you think that's gotten better over time? Is that what you're seeking to fix with Alida?
For sure, it's gotten much better, and it was slowly getting better for a very, very long time. And then, this is Ellen's fault again, then in 2014, the hashtag We Need Diverse Books was created, first as a social media hashtag, and eventually it grew and grew until what it is now, which is a major 501c3 foundation. So that really did sort of jumpstart conversations within the industry that had been sort of sleepy or dormant before. I mean, people were trying, individuals were trying. There's no question about that. And much of the work that at least I do is standing on the shoulders of giants before me. But they were individuals. And the adage, I don't know if it's an adage, but it works for me, that individuals change institutions, change society and culture. So there were individuals working, but there wasn't a movement per se, right? And what We Need Diverse Books did, what Ellen did and her co-founders, was to create a movement. And suddenly there were many more conversations. There was a lot more education going on, and there were a lot more opportunities. So I had been one of the individuals kind of flailing away, trying to figure out how I wanted things to work, how I wanted to make a difference in this field. And all of a sudden, with We Need Diverse Books, I found many more opportunities to do so. It's very difficult to say no to Ellen, so I am an honorary chair of a couple of the We Need Diverse Books program committees, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful way to participate and to give back. So, yes, I think that, you can see in all fields, like comic books, for example, there's all these heroes who aren't white anymore. Hooray,
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening on many different levels. Still not enough. We have a very long way to go. But it's very heartening to see the changes that have been happening.
For sure. Is there any new either books or movies or TV shows that you've enjoyed that you think is a product of all this movement?
What about for you, Ellen? Do you have some favorites?
I tend to watch K-dramas. I admit it. So I can't really talk to kind of move, although Everything Everywhere, of course, that's just just like a spectacular moment in time right now that we cherish. But I think in general, where we see it the most really is in books. Like there has been such a swell of wonderful marginalized, author and creator books that have come out. And of course, you're seeing the backlash with the book banning too. But we won't talk about that. We'll talk about how wonderful it is to see all these voices that have not been heard before are getting their moment, being published. And I think that Linda Sue's new imprint is going to be a major player in that, bringing more of these voices around. And Linda Sue's an icon, so I'm just
I don't know about that, but thank you. You can see, just as one example, you can see it in fantasy. For so long, fantasy was based almost entirely on medieval European tropes, right? You had your gnomes and your trolls and your, prince and princesses, and it was all very Middle Europe based. And now a young reader who's interested can find fantasies that are based on the mythologies and the tropes of many other cultures and countries. And it's just revitalized the whole genre. It's just like, I know there are people who are huge fans of Lord of the Rings, but it's really great to have other fantasy to be able to read. And it's just, as I said, it's invigorated the whole genre.
Yeah, that's very true. When my first book came out, Korean fantasy, I think it was the only Korean fantasy in YA at that moment. And now there's actually quite a lot of Korean fantasy books out there. It's just amazing.
That's awesome. I know when I was talking to you about this, Linda, before we hopped on, but my roommate, she stole You Are Here For Me as soon as she saw it. And she read it all in one night, and she was talking about how much it means to her and how much she wishes she had a book like that when she was a young girl. So I guess I just wanted to ask you guys, when you guys were younger, were there any books you could look to, or was it must have been really disheartening not seeing as much representation?
I will tell you that for me growing up, there were so few books that, I never felt like I was American enough. Because, when you don't see yourself in the pages of a book, it really is, kind of like saying that you are not part of your own world. And for me, especially growing up, I heard, go back to China and, you don't belong here. That was a constant refrain that I heard. And so I think You Are Here is about responding to that, saying, no, we do belong here, right? Because it took me until college when I read the Joy Luck Club to recognize the fact that I am American enough, that being Asian American is being American. But it took me till college. So, I think about that. I think about what a difference it would have made to have had a book like this when I was younger, and what a change maker would have been for me. Now, I will tell you this, my daughter had the same thing where she wasn't seeing a lot of books, but her first book seeing herself was Linda Sue's book in, I think it was 3rd grade. And she came running home, and her cover had an Asian girl on it, and she was like, Mom, look. And it was just awe, absolute awe. And, that's what we're here for. That's what we want to do when we write these books, is to give that moment. We want to get to a point where it's normal, where it isn't wow, it's me. And it becomes just part of the everyday that you would see stories about Asian Americans.
And I think that the corollary to that, Ellen, and sometimes I think it's even more important. I totally get, because along with you, I mean, you're younger than I am. There was even less when I was growing up and reading, right? And as important as it is for young Asian Americans to see themselves represented throughout popular culture, and especially in books, I sometimes think that the role of these kinds of stories is even more important for those in the dominant culture. I want this book handed to every kid, not just to the Asian kids, right? Because the dominant culture, they're the ones who have the responsibility ultimately to change society, right? To do the right thing. That's where the power lies, right? So it's important for me that every single kid, especially those in the dominant culture, read these narratives. And they're the ones who need to understand. We know the nuance, right? We know that. We know we're not all the same. It's other people who need to be learning that and who need to be seeing all kinds of peoples as individuals rather than lumping together them into a group, because that's how you get all kinds of problems, right? So I think especially books for young people whose minds are still open, I think they're an important part of that process.
For sure.
I agree.
And books are such a big way of building empathy because it puts the reader in someone else's shoes. And so if the only shoes they're being put in is that of their own culture, then how would they understand how it feels?
Exactly.
Yeah. You guys are so sweet and so supportive of each other. I love it. How long have you known each other for?
It must have been from We Need Diverse Books, right? Wait, no, because you wrote to me very shortly after. Sometimes in the popular media, you see that I'm one of the founders of We Need Diverse Books, and I'm always correcting people because I wasn't. Ellen invited me on board right away, very soon, but I was not one of the founders. But that must have been. Did we meet before that?
Yes, we did. That's why I reached out to you.
Right.
So I want to say we probably met in 2012 or 2013 at one of the first, one of the ALA or one of those, big conferences.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a while, like over 10 years, right? Or maybe.
For me, I wasn't by any means the only Korean American writer, but there were only a handful. And at some of my talks, I used to say, I know there are younger Korean American writers out there, and please hurry up, because this is a heavy load to handle when there's only a couple of us or only a few of us. And Ellen was one of those. So, and since then there are more. I have a website called kibuka.com, KIBOOKA, which is Kids Books by Korean Americans and the Korean diaspora. And that website lists now, we're close to 70 Korean creators of children's books. So people who are looking to make their shelves more inclusive, whether that's a library, a classroom, or parents, please have a look at kibuka.com. You will find Ellen's books there, and you will find other Korean American and Korean diaspora creators. Every listing just clicks straight through to their websites, so you will find out more about them.
Okay. And when families read this book together, the whole goal of our podcast is to give parents ideas for what to read with their children and build conversations between them. So what kind of conversations do you hope parents can have with their kids when reading You Are Here?
Oh, what a great question. I think that it is important for parents to remember that these are stories about a whole variety of different East Asian and Southeast Asian kids, but they're all American, right? We very much grounded these stories in the American experience. And I think that when they talk about these stories, whether they are Asian American or not, I think it's all about that belonging, right? And that individuals, no matter how different, are still part of our community. And I think when we titled the book You Are Here, it was really about that kind of sense of here we are as a community. Don't forget our place here, kind of, because that gets forgotten, where people still always look at us and see a foreigner because of how we look instead of another fellow American. And I think that, these stories are all about that experience of being American and also being othered, but it also is about our love for our country and being American too. Linda Sue, what do you think?
I think that's a great question. I have not been asked that question before about what parents should talk about with their kids. And I guess in addition to sort of whatever you want to call them, the heavier themes, that my goal with my books is, because they're books for kids, they always have to be entertaining. You always want kids to be having fun reading, or at least, fun in quotes, but they don't have to all be silly or funny, but just being compelled and wanting to read on. And so I think looking at some of the fun aspects of the book, like, can you recreate Ellen's spreadsheet? And not really, but can you figure out, can you trace one character and see how often they show up in the other books? Let's look at a map of an airport and see, how the geography of this story might have taken place. Just to make it fun as well as to make it philosophical.
Mm-hmm.
I see. I'm so glad Linda Sue is here to mention that, because I got caught up in the weeds with, we belong and everything. And yeah, absolutely. These books have to be fun. They have to be enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And it was so enjoyable.
Thank you.
Even for me, and I'm 22 now, so. But
this book is for everyone.
Yes. And I know you have another interview right after this, so I want to make sure we wrap up on time. So I wanted to turn the conversation over to you guys to see if there is anything more you wanted to say about the book or anything before I let you guys go.
I want to say one thing, which is that Ellen put together an incredible lineup for this book. Okay, I mean, it is just a wonderful collection of writers, and that she was able to do that because of her reputation in our industry. Having started We Need Diverse Books, and what she's done for other people, for other creators, and for young readers. As I said, it's not that she's hard to say no to. It's just that we want to support what she does. And so I don't think she had to convince anybody to say yes. We all jumped in and said, yes, let's do this. And so you have Grace Lynn Newbery honor winner, Erin Entrada Kelly Newbery winner, Christina Soontorn-Vaught Newbery honor winner. You just have this sort of who's who of Asian American and East Asian and Southeast American creators. So that's another reason that readers are in for a real treat with this book.
Mm-hmm. Anything from you, Ellen? Or
I am verklempt. Thank you, Linda Sue, and thank you, Jordan, for having us. I'm so glad you like the book and you are supporting it like this.
Of course, yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I love talking to you. And thank you to all of our listeners for listening to the podcast today.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And we hope that you'll join us for the next exciting episode of the show. To make sure you don't miss a moment of the show, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks going out to my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Jordan Sahley, Will Cheever, Cassandra Masonet, Stephanie Davila. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.